The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the December 21st, 2020 Westminster City Council meeting. We'd ask you at this time to please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. Ms. Fitch, would you take the roll, please?
Certainly. Mayor Atchison.
Yes.
Councillor DeMott.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Sites. Councillor Seymour.
Here.
Councillor Scully. Councillor Smith
Present.
and Councillor Bowles.
Here.
Council, we've had a request for an excused absence for Councillor Sites. She's unable to attend tonight. So Mr. Seymour, would you please?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I move that we show Mayor Pro Tem Sites as excused absence this evening.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second. All those in favor, please signify by aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion to provide an excused absence for Mayor Pro Tem Sites tonight is approved. The next item on the agenda is the consideration of the minutes of December the 14th. Now, what is your pleasure? Councilor Seymour?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move to approve the minutes of the December 14th, 2020 meeting as presented.
Okay, is there a second? Councilor DeMott?
Second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. All in favor, please voice your opinions. All those in favor, please signify with aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion is carried. Moving on to the next item. This is a continuation of a presentation we attempted to do last week. Before we get into the proclamation, Mr. Williams, would you try to play the video that we were trying to play last week for us?
Academy of Charter Schools, and I've been a staff liaison on the Youth Advisory Panel for the last 2 years. Kayla?
Hi, my name is Kayla Delgado. I am the Irving Street Library Coordinator for the Westminster Public Libraries, and I am also a staff liaison for the Westminster Youth Advisory Panel. We would love to introduce you to our 2020 and 2021 Youth Advisory Panel members.
Hi, I'm Rachel Shagnon. I'm a senior at Northland High School, and this is my 3rd year on the panel, and this year I'm serving as chair. Jack?
I'm Jack. My real name is John. I go to Monarch High School, and I'm a senior this year. I am the vice chair, and I've been on the app panel for 5 years. I'd like to introduce Blake.
Hi, my name is Blake. I go to Stargate School as a sophomore, and I've been on the panel for 3 years. My position is secretary. Kylie?
Hi, my name is Kylie Nazarinas. I go to Pomona High School. I've been on the panel for 3 years, and I am the PIO for the group. Savannah?
Hi, I'm Savannah. I'm a senior at Summit Academy. I've been on the council for a year, and I am the treasurer. Elisa?
Hi, I'm Elisa. I'm a sophomore and I'm homeschooled, and this is my 1st year on the panel. Irving?
Hello, I'm Irving Mendoza. I'm a sophomore at Westminster High School, and this is my 3rd year on this panel. Alondra?
Hello, my name's Alondra Mendoza. I'm a freshman at Westminster High School. I recently joined the panel, but I hope to be in the panel for many years to come. Kaya?
Hi, I'm Kaya Vieira. I'm a senior at Jefferson Academy, and I've been a part of the panel for 4 years. Yuri?
Hi, I'm Yuri. I go to Stargate School, and I'm a junior, and this is my 3rd year in the panel.
We're excited to serve on the Westminster Youth Advisory Panel. Happy?
Holidays.
From
The city
Of
Westminster?
you?
Advisory?
panel.
Well, thank you to all the students who were a part of that. We appreciate very much you taking the time and the services you're providing to the city. With that being said, I did get kind of admonished last week that I forgot a very important part of what we were supposed to do. And that was to have wished happy birthday to Officer Kelly Jacobson, as last week was her birthday and the kids had sort of made an idea of trying to do something for her. So Kelly, happy belated birthday. At this time, I'd like to read the proclamation for the students who are you just were introduced to. Whereas the City Council of the City of Westminster believes our youth should share with their community leaders the responsibility in addressing their needs, desires, challenges, and issues in molding their own futures. And whereas the city values its youth and desires to advance and promote their special needs and interests, and therefore created the Westminster Youth Advisory Panel on September 13th, 1999. Whereas currently the panel has 12 members appointed to the 2020-21 school year, and whereas it's important to acknowledge the contributions made by incoming panel members. Now, therefore, I, Herb Atchison, Mayor of the City of Westminster, Colorado, on behalf of the entire City Council and staff, to hereby recognize and extend appreciation to the following incoming Youth Advisory Panel members who are currently serving on the Youth Advisory Panel, representing their schools and Westminster youth. Rachel Shagnon, Chair. Jack Smith, Vice Chair. Blake Bowie, Secretary. Savannah Scarrato, Treasurer. Kylie Nazarinas, Public Information Officer. Riggs Abbott, Yuri Thong, Elisa Bell-Yung, Irving Mendoza, Madeline Rouse, Kaya Vieira, and Alondra Mendoza. Signed this 14th day of December, 2020. Again, we appreciate very much the students and to recognize, please, how hard it has been for us to fill the vacancies of the group that we honored last week due to the COVID and the schools not being open. As soon as the opportunity presents itself, myself and the panel members will be back in the schools trying to recruit enough to fill back up our panel. But as I indicated to the chamber last week, if you have students that you think would be viable to become a part of this panel, we do take consideration of students from 8th grade through 12th grade. Please send it either to me in care of the city or to either one of our two staff representatives. So thank you much, students, and congratulations. Next item on the agenda is presentations, and that was done on there. Next item up is Ms. Fitch's for public comment.
We have one gentleman speaking this evening, Mr. Parker Brown. So let me
All right.
unmute him. Go
Y'all
ahead,
hear me?
Mr. Brown.
Perfect. So thank you, Mayor. Thank you, City Council members, for allowing me the time to speak. I am speaking today to let y'all know that I want your support in the favor of the cap for third-party delivery fees. And kind of my reasons why. I know I've talked to several council members already, regarding this is, first off, restaurant margins are really low. So what we do in the restaurants is we're bringing in only probably 10 to 15% to the bottom line. What's happening with third-party delivery fees is they're charging us 20 to 30% on every single order. Then on top of that, what they're doing is they're charging the customer, $10 to $12 to deliver it. I don't think it's fair, number one, that they don't disclose this information to the customer, that this is how this works. Most customers think that they're the ones picking up the fees on all the third parties. Little do they know that we're being charged anywhere from 20 to 30%. So what does that mean? We lose money on every single third party order. I was talking to a council member the other night, and he asked me, well, let me ask you, why do you participate in third party delivery fees if you're losing money? Well, I'll explain it to you. The reason why we participate is to be competitive in the market. When people look at Grubhub and they look at DoorDash and they look at Uber Eats and they're looking for a place to eat, if you're not on there, you don't get the order. If you search Italian food, could I represent Carrabba's Italian Grill? We're not on there, we don't get the order. The goal is to have a first-time customer order from Grubhub in hopes that they're going to come eat in our dining room. So city council members, mayor, please put a cap on the third-party delivery fees in order to take the stress and alleviate some of the pressure off the businesses in this pandemic. Thank you for your time.
Ms. Fitch, that's the only one you have. Do we have any from email?
We have no emails, nor do we have any voicemails this evening.
All right, thank you, ma'am. We'll move on from item 5 to the report of the city officials. Mr. Tripp.
Yes, Mr. Mayor and members of the City Council, as this is the last meeting for 2020, I want to say to all of the city staff, part-time, full-time, benefited, non-benefited, seasonal, everybody who participates and contributes to the city's quality of life, I thank you for your service this year. And to you, council members, and all the folks that are appointed to be members of our boards and commission, you are wonderful for what you do for our community. It's a great commitment of time, energy, a lot of emotion, and it's a difficult job. And sometimes it's a very thankless job. And those of us that work for you value and appreciate what you do to give back to your communities. We're humbled by that, and we look forward to a terrific 2021.
Thank you, Mr. Tripp. Moving to council comments. Council, does anyone have any reports or comments they'd like to make, starting with Councilor Scully?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, I'd like to acknowledge and thank the Youth Advisory Panel for their wonderful message tonight. It means a lot to us to hear you, to see your youthfulness. It is quite rewarding, so thank you. Also, I wanted to thank Mr. Brown for his public comment tonight. Public comment is the best way to engage your city council and have a voice in how your city is run and the decisions we make. So thank you. Thank you for having the courage to step up and reach out to us. That's really important. And then finally, I'd like to wish all our residents happy holidays. It's been kind of a rough year, but we have a new year to look forward to, and may we all find peace, joy, safety, and good health in our new year.
Councilor Bowles.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I had the opportunity last Thursday to be our representative for the North Area Transportation Alliance, NETA. And we received a report or a presentation from Senator Faith Winter and Representative Matt Gray regarding legislation on transportation this upcoming session. And what they're going to be looking at, just briefly without getting into all the details, is increasing some areas of fees, not taxes. And even though the gas tax hasn't really been adjusted since 1992, there's other issues about delivery. We may be using our roads differently. These are kind of what they want to look at, meaning we maybe don't go and get in our car and go somewhere to buy something, but we order it. That road is being used to deliver that to your property, to your house. So I think that's some of the things they want to look at, Uber and Lyft, and also electric vehicles. So the gas tax, obviously with electric vehicles, there needs to be some kind of adjustment. So they're looking to look at inputs and outputs, and it's a question of fairness. So I think they're going to look at all of those issues in this next coming session. So we also then heard from the brand new general manager, Deborah Johnson, who came here from California. She introduced herself, and she's very interested in, at least at this stage, of collaboration and hearing from those of us in the North End. So it was nice to have at our meeting, and we got to share with her some of our thoughts about what happens in our area related to the RTD. So she's the new general manager of RTD and kind of shared her thoughts with the group. So that was nice. And then they also had election of officers for the 2021 year. And for the chair position, it's Jessica Sandrin, Mayor Pro Tem of Thornton. Vice Chair will be Councilor Joan Peck of Longmont. And then our own Mayor Pro Tem Anita Seitz will serve as treasurer for next year. So those are the three officers for the upcoming year. So that is my report. Thank you. And then I also want to say happy holidays to everyone and be safe and be healthy. Thank you.
Other comments from council? Councilor Demont.
Thank you. I just wanted to share with the public that may have listened to the meeting last week. There was an item talking about some water stuff in reference to the Water 2025 plan and the site that the city intends to purchase in order to build that plan. It was said in that meeting that this entire council were the ones who voted on that, referenced July 22nd, 2019 meeting. I just wanted to share a couple things about that particular meeting if you go read the minutes. In that meeting, I was actually excused from that meeting because I was out of town on business. So therefore, I did not vote on moving forward with acquiring that property. The other thing is 2 members of council who are now on this council were not on the council at that time. So I just wanted to share that with the public to set the record straight because I think it's important to get facts. The other thing I'd like to do is, it's been, like stated before, a long year. I hope that all of you are seeing the end of this year as a blessing and you're able to spend time with your family and you have a Merry Christmas and a happy, safe New Year. Thank you.
Other comments? Just backing up to Councilor Bowles' comments, the governor announced late this afternoon that January the 12th, the new 2021 legislature will convene for 1 day, and then they will recess until approximately the middle of February. They've indicated they're taking this because of concerns with COVID infections. That doesn't mean they won't come back early, but that does mean instead of the normal time that they end on the 120 day from January 12th will not be on a 120-day cycle. They've not indicated that they're going to shorten the session either. So we'll have to wait until they come back in February to see what they're going to do. Moving on to the next item, a consent agenda. This is a group of routine matters to be acted on with a single motion vote. I have polled the council already, and there has been a request to remove item 8A from the consent agenda. That leaves items 8B, C, and D. Councilor Seymour, if you would, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move to adopt consent agenda items 8B through 8D.
Okay, Councilor Vols.
I second the motion.
We have a motion and a second. We'll move forward for the roll call vote. Ms. Fitch, if you would, please.
Mayor Atchison,
Yes.
Counselor Demott,
Yes.
Counselor Seymour,
Yes.
Counselor Scully,
Yes.
Counselor Smith,
Yes.
and Counselor Vols.
Yes.
All right, thank you, council. Motion passes on a 6-0 vote. We will move back to item 8A. This is a financial report. If I could have a motion so we can bring this to the table. Councilor Scully.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move that we adopt item 8A, the financial report, for approval.
All right, Councilor Seymour.
Second.
All right, I have a motion and a second. Are there any questions? And I know, Councilor Scully, you had some comments or questions in regards to the report. Could you go ahead?
Yes, sir. So I asked specifically, I wanted this financial report pulled out of the agenda because I think it's important that we discuss and update the public on this particular report. I found it really interesting when I was reading through all the details. There's a lot to it. Some of it seems to be pretty good news and some of it seems to be interesting. And so I was looking for maybe some updates from our city staff. Specifically, I wanted to know a little bit about how the CARES funding was used. I saw that we were under budget in several areas, that we were, I was wondering if there were any surprises, and that we had some areas where we had more revenues than we thought we would, and then some areas where we had less revenues. So I was wondering if our city staff could address some of those questions. And then I was also very curious about our online sales and tax use revenues. They seemed very high, and I was wondering if somebody could address that. I think that is a result of work from our former representative, House Representative Tracy Kraft-Tharp, now Commissioner-elect for Jefferson County. So I was just wondering if staff could kind of address some of those. I think it would be good for the public and the residents to hear that information out loud.
All right, Mr. Tripp.
Thank you, Councilor Scully. We've had a challenging time in 2020 with predictions and to get to the finish line here with a balanced budget for 21, having completed a balanced cycle for 20, and to have this financial report to you at this time is very encouraging. There is reason for optimism. I'm going to ask the Chief Financial Officer, Larry Dorr, provide you maybe a bit of an overview and answer some of those specific questions. He'll also have some help from our Finance Director, Tammy Hitchens, to get into more of that detail. But you're correct, I think, to point out the cycle that we've been in, how challenging it is, and the fact that the report that we have in front of us today is optimistic, and it does, in fact, deserve some credit towards our ability to collect sales tax from the over-the-road sales that are happening as a part of the Wayfair Act. Thank you.
Mr. Dorr.
Thank you. Yes, thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Mr. Tripp. Thank you, Councilor Scully, for your question, and Mayor and Council. This is Larry Dorr speaking, Chief Financial Officer and Deputy City Manager. Well, thank you for the opportunity to talk about tonight's financial report. This is our November year-to-date report, and as you mentioned, has a lot of information, a lot of details, a 15-page report. And I was just quickly taking notes on some of your questions here, and just we'll go through some of those. I think the big picture is that our community has every reason to be cautiously optimistic about its finances thus far to date. I will say that today itself is quite an occasion because today sales tax returns either need to be filed online or postmarked for November activities. And of course, November activities include the Black Friday sales events, the Cyber Mondays, and all of the holiday shopping season that begins in November. And this is the second largest sales tax collection activities for sales that occur in November. So we're eagerly awaiting information regarding November sales, and all reports from the national level. Retailers are reporting significant online sales, as you just pointed out. So it's quite an occasion to be talking about that tonight, and of course we'll be updating the public on our receipts at our next occasion. But those numbers for November sales taxes and so forth are still coming. They're still several days away. But what we do know is, as you just pointed out, the online sector is producing record levels, some 20 to 25% increases. That's just sensational. Quite a lot of activity there. But obviously, we have restaurants for indoor dining are closed in our Westminster community, and that's having an offsetting impact, and hence kind of our cautious optimism, because sales tax receipts for the 1 month did increase. That's encouraging. It's great to see that our households in the city of Westminster have discretionary spending, many of them, and their households are able to do that. So additionally, we do have some underspending, as you pointed out. We do have our selective hiring, our freeze happening, and we have some 59 vacant positions, and we've reported on that recently. And that's the lion's share of the savings happening across the city in our various departments with vacancies. So that those are paying dividends or creating savings for us in order to bridge the gap and balance our budget. Let's see, regarding CARES, if I may, under our COVID-19 update later on tonight on the agenda, I'll have a couple of PowerPoint slides and a few more details, and I'll be able to answer some questions regarding CARES spending. But we do have those receipts, as you would guess, through the end of November. We hadn't quite dispersed all of that. So there's some favorable numbers there. And then lastly, and I, again, be happy to answer any specific questions. Tammy Hitchens and I, Finance Director, can do that. But I wanted to talk about Council's action at its last meeting, whereby the sales and use tax intergovernmental agreement with the state has occurred, whereby the legislation that you referred to with Representative Kraft Tharp, which was a couple of years in the making, quite honestly. That intergovernmental agreement was approved by City Council unanimously and will potentially lead to those increased receipts here in the very near future for City of Westminster via the Wayfair case. This was Supreme Court of the United States decision from earlier this year that has been in the making. So with that, we look forward to some of those online receipts coming in 2021, and we've made some anticipation for those coming ahead. So hopefully that gives a general overview. Again, we do have a reason to be cautiously optimistic. We have automobile sales occurring. We're seeing some activity in our permits and construction tax areas. But again, mostly on par with budget, which has been reduced, our anticipated collection for 2019. And that's consistent with other municipalities across the Front Range and across the country. So again, looks like some national legislation as well could bring some money into Westminster households that would allow for additional discretionary spending through the rest of this year and early into next year. So with that, may I answer any specific questions, or if I may, Tammy Hitchens may have some additional comments. Thank you.
Yeah, I did have one specific question on the water. I saw that our revenues were higher, I believe, than last year. And I was wondering if that had any result of, did we put any CARES money toward our water? And correct me if I misread it. There were a lot of details in the report, which I really appreciated. And is that, are we on target, or do we feel like we might be able to reevaluate how we're using the money or how we are taking in the money for water specifically?
Thank you, Councilor. Tammy, I'd invite you to comment a little bit about revenue year to date versus prior year, but I can say that the city's CARES funds receipts were not eligible for a contribution to the city's utility and so forth. We did have some smaller support for some residents for a short period of time, but nothing that would change that revenue characteristic. Tammy, would you have some additional comments?
I would just say that as far as the revenue goes this year, and in particular with the water, yes, it's greater than it was in 2019. The primary reason for that is, of course, we had a long, hot summer, and we actually had increase in the rates, so that combination increased the revenue, which we would have expected it, even all things being equal, as far as usage, we would have expected an increase just because the rates increased. And then secondly, with increased usage, then it's that much more prominent. So I would say that's not a surprise. That's what would be expected, would be to have increased revenues from that.
Okay, thank you very much.
Other comments or questions from council on the financial report? All right, seeing no other comments. Councilor Bowles, did you have a question?
I did, just really very briefly. I want to thank Councilor Scully for this question. I think it's important. I want to take it a step further. Will there be, when would we expect a final accounting of where CARES Act funds have been spent? And then I think the mayor may have said this last week, but I just want to follow up. Will there be a final report, kind of where the money went, housing assistance, helping our restaurants, helping businesses? I would like to see that. I just want to ask at this point when that might happen, or if it's going to happen. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Councilor Bowles. If I may just quickly address that later on tonight, I will have at a high level a description of how all the funds have been dispersed, and we will be presenting additional details on the city's website down to a more line item type level. But yes, just a little bit later this evening, I'll be able to break out how those funds were dispersed, sir. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
One thing that to kind of follow on with where Mr. Doerr's at, in the stimulus package that is being discussed right now in the House, an extension of the CARES Act reporting, which would have been the end of next week, is proposed to be extended for 6 months. So it depends upon if that package ever gets through the House and Senate and the president signs it. So we're hoping that it does, because it makes it easier on people. Otherwise, we've got like a week left. And I think, as Mr. Doerr and them have reported, we have no issue meeting the commitment for the end of December. But there are communities within the state that are struggling to get some last minute dollars spent. Any other comments or questions on item 8A? If not, this is a roll call vote. Ms. Fitch, if you would, please.
Councilor Demott.
Yes.
Councilor Seymour.
Yes.
Councilor Scully.
Yes.
Councilor Smith.
Yes.
Councilor Bowles.
Yes.
And Mayor Atchison.
Yes. Thank you, Council. The consent agenda is complete with a 6-0 vote on both items. Moving on to the next item, item 9. This is appointments and resignations. Move to request for a motion for resolution number 53. And Councilor Scully.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move to adopt resolution number 53, reappointing members and appointing new and alternate members to the Environmental Advisory Board, Historic Landmark Board, Human Services Board, Inclusivity Board, Parks, Recreation, Libraries, and Open Space Advisory Board, Personnel Board, Planning Commission, and Special Permit and License Board, respectively.
Councilor Smith.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion on the appointments? Councilor Scully.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to thank everyone who came out and interviewed with us for these positions. Our boards and our commissions and our panels are the, in my eyes, the most important, one of the most important components of our city council. These are extended hands into the community, and I thank everyone who serves on our boards. If you ever have an interest, I encourage you to take the opportunity to apply. And also remember that our boards, commissions, and panels are all open to the public. You are welcome to come and be a bystander in the audience, and often there is an opportunity for public comment. So please, if you don't have a desire to actually serve on a board, or you just are interested in what's going on with a certain part of our city, please feel free to attend our boards, commissions, and panel meetings. Thank you.
Councilor Vols.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I also want to thank members of our residents who step up and serve and give us their time and talents. And it's a tremendous opportunity, and it really helps our city move along, and it helps us do our jobs as council members. I did have a question. I think our code stipulates that there are term limits. I think you can do 4 two-year appointments, a total of 8 years. Are we tracking that, or how is that being tracked? I guess I would ask the clerk's office or the city manager's office. I am not aware of that, but maybe it's happening, and I would just be curious, because I would like to know, but I think all of our members who serve on boards and commissions would want to know maybe when their term is up, if it is, or how that works, if we don't already do that.
Thank you for the advanced question on that, Councilor Volz. So I did some checking today, and City Clerk Fitch might want to add something to it, or even our city attorney. But just very briefly, in 2017, the council took action to provide term limits for those that are parts of boards and commissions. The term limits are from 2-year terms, 4 terms. So that's a total of 8 years. That started fresh with all the existing board and commission members. So starting in 2017, their first 2-year term began, and then proceeds from there. The city clerk, I think, will also be providing some updates to you as to how we might be looking at the application of those term limits to reappointments in the future. I think that would be a point of discussion maybe for the full council as to how you want to handle that moving forward. But just to clarify, you're right in remembering that there are term limits today, and they're being monitored, and that record's being maintained by the city clerk.
Okay, very good. Yeah, thank you for that. And I was just curious if we were tracking that, and we are. So thank you for that, and thank you for that answer. And again, I want to thank our residents who step up and volunteer their time. It's a wonderful resource to our community. So thank you very much.
Any other comments from council? All right, seeing none. Ms. Fitch, this is resolution number 53. It's a roll call vote, please.
Counselor Seymour.
Yes.
Seymour votes yes. Counselor Scully.
Yes.
Scully votes yes. Counselor Smith.
Yes.
Counselor Smith votes yes. Counselor Vols.
Yes.
Counselor Vols votes yes. Mayor Atchison.
Yes.
Mayor Atchison votes yes. Counselor DeMott.
Yes.
Counselor DeMott votes yes.
Thank you, council. Moving on to the next item on the appointments is resolution number 54. This is regarding the appointment of the acting presiding judge. Councilor Vols.
There we go. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I move to adopt resolution number 54, appointing Jason Luntang as acting presiding municipal court judge effective July 12th, 2021, to exercise the duties and responsibilities of presiding municipal court judge under the city charter till such time as a new presiding municipal court judge is appointed by city council.
Mr. Vols, would I ask you to modify that instead of June and make that January?
Oh, did I say June? I'm not having a good night tonight, am I? January, yeah, thank you.
Okay. Councilor Scully.
I second the motion.
Okay. Do we have a motion for resolution number 54? And a second. Are there any comments from the council? Counselor Scully.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to say thank you to Jason for stepping up as our acting presiding municipal court judge, being willing to take this on, and we look forward to working with you. And we would like to, or I would like to say, we will miss you, Judge Soros, but we know you are on to a greater future. So thank you for all your service to our city. It has meant a great deal to us. You have taken us to great places, and we appreciate your hard work, and we look forward to working with Jason. Thank you.
Any other comments from council? All right, seeing none. Ms. Fitch, this is resolution number 54. It's a roll call vote, please.
Counselor Scully.
Yes.
Counselor Scully votes yes. Counselor Smith.
Yes.
Counselor Smith votes yes. Counselor Bowles.
Yes.
Counselor Bowles votes yes. Mayor Atchison.
Yes.
Mayor Atchison votes yes. Counselor DeMott.
Yes.
Counselor DeMott votes yes. Counselor Seymour.
Yes.
Counselor Seymour votes yes.
All right, thank you, Counselor. Resolution number 54 passes on a 6-0 vote. Moving to the next item, item 10A. This is a recommendation for this from the city manager to determine on a sole source contract with Carlson, Hammond, Paddock. Counselor Smith.
Thank you. I move based on the recommendation of the city manager to determine that the public interest will best be served by authorizing the city manager to execute a sole source contract with Carlson, Hammond, and Paddock LLC for special water council legal services in amounts not to exceed $515,000 for 2021.
Counselor Seymour.
Second.
I have a motion and a second for item 10A. Is any discussion or comments from council? Counselor DeMont.
I'm just curious on this cost, a couple things. One, how does this match up with prior years? And two, looking at the alternatives, if we didn't go this route, some of them I don't think are really alternatives. Like, we're obviously not going to not do anything. So I'd like to understand if we utilize this in-house or some hybrid of that, like how does that actually look if we weren't to move forward with this contract?
Mr. Frankel, I think this is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Dave Frankel, City Attorney. I'll look to Sarah Borgers, who is the primary point of contact with our outside water attorneys at Carlson, Hammond, and Paddock. As her agenda memo correctly points out, they've been serving the city since 1977, and we do have the highest level of confidence in their services. They are expert in water law, which is a very specialized area of the law, and we are definitely appreciative of the services that they provide for us. As to alternatives, in light of the cost, I would probably need Ms. Borgers to remind as to previous year's expenditures. I don't know that I have access to the prior year's expenditures. What I can tell you, though, is that Carlson, Hammond, and Paddock are leaders in water law, and the hourly rates that they charge to the city are competitive, and I believe that they are fair for the services they provide. The other benefit to the city of having this continuity of services from Carlson, Hammond, and Paddock are their familiarity with our water rights, as they were the firm who helped us establish our water rights along the Clear Creek. And if any of you have time to take a tour of the Clear Creek with our water attorneys, I highly recommend it. I had the pleasure of doing so approximately 3 years ago. And as you travel along the Clear Creek, they have stories to tell with regard to every diversion that is taking water out of the Clear Creek and putting water back into the Clear Creek, because obviously we draw our water supply from the Clear Creek. We have a canal that transports it over to Stanley Lake, and we have relationships with other cities that draw from the Clear Creek Basin, as well as other cities that discharge into the Clear Creek Basin. So we want to ensure that we have the highest quality of water. I think that in managing outside counsel, we always strive to minimize the costs to the city. So we are actively involved in meeting with Carlson, Hammond, and Paddock. I believe water staff are meeting with them every week, really, to talk about pending cases to ensure that the city's water rights are properly managed and that our changes of use are proceeding through the courts, and that we are heard with regard to other users of Clear Creek water where our interests are directly impacted by those other cases. So it's actually a kind of a broader scope of service than just vindicating the city's water rights, but it's also defending the city's water rights when other cities are drawing upon the same basin. And if Ms. Borgers is available, I would gladly welcome her to supplement my response. Sarah, are you available?
I am, and Dave, thank you for that. We certainly do have a long relationship with this company, as well as the companies that we'll talk about in items B and C. But to your question, Mr. Councilor DeMott, about is this more or less than what we've spent in the past? The last about 3 years or so, we have been in an ongoing water court matter, water court case 18 CW 3090. And because of that large water court case the last couple of years, the amount of money we've needed to spend with CHP has been slightly higher than average. That case is scheduled to go to trial in February of 2022, so we would anticipate that slightly increased level of expenditures for the remainder of this year. We're hopeful that we won't have to go all the way to trial, but we are prepared with budget to do so with this contract.
Mr. Franklin, I think the other question that Councilor DeMott had was, is this work that you can be doing internal?
Speaking for the city attorney's office, I'm glad to respond to that. We do not have the capability that Carlson and Hammond and Paddock provide to us in terms of their expertise as leaders in water law in Colorado. So we are reliant upon their services. There are a limited number of experts in this field, and they are largely in private practice. So we in the past have made a choice, which is to rely upon their expertise, as it was more economical for the city to benefit from their expertise on an hourly basis than attempt to house those attorneys in-house full-time. And I understand there was one other question, if I could, while I'm responding, relative to the one-year nature of the contract that's proposed for council's consideration tonight. It's my understanding, after speaking with Ms. Borgers, that it has not always been a one-year contract, but that it is presented tonight as a one-year contract for budgetary purposes. But if there is interest in the future, I believe it would be possible to go for longer than 1 year, if that is council's desire. We have, I understand from Ms. Borgers, gone 2 years in the past and potentially 3. Sarah, could you confirm or correct me if you would?
That is true. We did the 1 year contract to be in line with the 1 year budget cycle that we are working on for the 2021 budget year. So we just kept this contract in line with that.
All right. Councilor Smith, you had a question. Or before I start you, Councilor DeMont, does that answer your questions?
No, it does. Thank you. I appreciate, Mr. Frankel, your explanation of it. I think when people see big price tags like that, and knowing we have a legal department, it's important for the public to understand why we go for outside counsel, and understanding that it's because of their expertise. And even if you could, in my mind, even if you could hire the perfect experts in-house, that may not be the most economical choice, if you could even find those folks that have the same kind of expertise as this firm. So I appreciate you explaining that for people to understand.
Councilor Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And Mr. Frankel, that was one of my questions I had sent in, is regarding if we're only doing, if we know that we've been a long-term user of renewing this contract, why wouldn't we go into a longer contract, potentially saving dollars so that was one of my concerns, is that it's only 1 year. And then my other question was, when you were answering it, is how long have we done in the past? And it was 2 to 3 years. So I would be interested to looking at this at a longer term. I know that there's some budgetary constraints, but if there's any wiggle room as to how we can save longer in the long run, I know staff has looked at that before, and I've been appreciative of that, even though it's a bigger dollar item to actually approve. It might actually, in the long run, outweigh that cost. So I would be interested as a council to see that from staff. And just in general, this is more for Mr. Tripp. Just looking at the next items that we are going to approve as a council, or not approve, but to vote on as a council. I would like to see from staff all of the contractual basis that we have for water, whether that be water rights, whether that be lawyers, whether that be, I'd like to see it all in one spreadsheet and not in various meetings that we approve. I think it would be helpful not only for the public, but for myself to get a comprehensive understanding as far as who we have on board for all of our water pieces, and then the line items that we're contractually obligated to work with them for. So not an item to be answered tonight, but I would like in coming weeks, maybe by the end of January, to have that comprehensive basis so that we're able to then, as a council, when we're looking at 2022 water rates, see it more of a comprehensive list. So that's just my comments. So thank you both for your time.
And if I could, Counselor, the other aspect of our outside water council's work for the city is that there are several cases ongoing that they represent us on. And I've been in touch with them to confirm that they are able, and we plan to now present to council quarterly updates directly from our outside water attorneys. So for the benefit of city council to keep informed as to the ongoing nature of the work that they're doing on behalf of our city. So I wanted to share that with you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Franklin. Any other comments or questions from council? All right, moving back to item 10A, we have a motion and a second. Ms. Fitch, this is a roll call vote, please, of item 10A.
Counselor Smith.
Yes.
Counselor Smith votes yes. Counselor Bowles.
Yes.
Counselor Bowles votes yes. Mayor Atchison.
Yes.
Mayor Atchison votes yes. Counselor Demott.
Yes.
Counselor Demott votes yes. Counselor Seymour.
Yes.
Counselor Seymour votes yes. And Counselor Scully.
Yes.
Counselor Scully votes yes.
All right, thank you, council. That passes item 10A on a 6-0 vote. Moving on to item 10B. Counselor Seymour.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move based on the recommendation of the city manager to determine that the public interest will be best served by authorizing the city manager to execute a 1-year sole source contract with Ecological Resource Consultants, Inc. for water resources engineering services in an amount not to exceed $110,000 for 2021.
Counselor Bowles.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion on item 10B? Seeing no discussion, sorry, Counselor Bowles, did you have something?
Just really quickly, I want to thank staff for, in these reports tonight, we have sole source contracts. It's that time of year when we do lots of contracts, but these are sole source contracts, and it's been included in our backup report for us on council, but then for any members of the public who want to follow along, why these are sole source and the expertise needed. And also there's a survey of hourly rates and where this fits within that amongst other folks doing this kind of work. So I think it's very helpful for us and for the public to follow along to see where these sole source contracts fall within the hourly rate fits in an average or kind of right in the middle. So I want to thank staff for that. I think it's helpful. Thank you.
All right. Any other comments from council? All right, seeing none. Ms. Fitch, this is item 10B, please.
Counselor Bowles.
Yes.
Counselor Bowles votes yes. Mayor Atchison.
Yes.
Mayor Atchison votes yes. Counselor Demott.
Yes.
Counselor Demott votes yes. Counselor Seymour.
Yes.
Counselor Seymour votes yes. Counselor Scully.
Yes.
Counselor Scully votes yes. Counselor Smith.
Yes.
Counselor Smith votes yes.
Thank you, council. Moving on to item 10C. Counselor Seymour.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move based on the recommendation of the city manager to determine that the public interest will be best served by authorizing the city manager to execute a one-year sole source contract with Hydros Consulting, Inc. for water supply modeling in an amount not to exceed $110,000 for 2021.
Counselor Bowles.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Is any discussion on item 10C? Seeing no discussion, Ms. Fitch, this is item 10C, please.
Mayor Atchison.
Yes.
Mayor Atchison votes yes. Counselor Demott.
Yes.
Counselor Demott votes yes. Counselor Seymour.
Yes.
Counselor Seymour votes yes. Counselor Scully.
Yes.
Counselor Scully votes yes. Counselor Smith.
Yes.
Counselor Smith votes yes. And Counselor Bowles.
Yes.
Counselor Bowles votes yes.
All right, thank you, council. Item 10C passes on a 6-0 vote. Moving on to item 10D. Counselor Seymour.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move based on the recommendation of the city manager to determine the public interest would best be served by ratifying a negotiated sole source contract for an emergency purchase of up to $500,000 with Advanced Urgent Care, LLC, for COVID-19 testing services in 2020 and 2021.
Counselor Bowles.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Is there any questions or comments on item 10D? Counselor Demott.
I'm looking at this item and I'm curious on a couple aspects of it. One, I'm curious how this testing and who this testing gets done on, if it's mandatory or not. If it is mandatory, what happens if someone says they don't want the test? Likewise, I would like to know why we waited so long to do the testing. I feel like I know I asked about this in April when I saw some of our fellow municipalities doing testing. So, we're well into this year, and I'm just curious to understand kind of our strategy around this.
Mr. Tripp.
Certainly, I'd be happy to answer a couple portions of this, and I'm going to bring Max Kirschbaum on. And he also has the two public safety directors available to handle these questions. Just briefly, my portion of it would be to say yes to the mandatory testing. It is required of all of our folks in these work units to take the test. We are doing this for the good of the entire unit to make sure that if we can catch a person who's asymptomatic, we get them out of the workplace so they're not infecting other folks. And so far that's been successful. In fact, we found some folks that did not realize they were positive through this testing process. It took longer than all of us would have preferred, Councilor Demott. Initially, I would tell you that we were not comfortable with the success that was being showed in some of the tests that were available to us at that time. But from the moment we said go, for all of the protocols that were necessary to follow to get us to this point, it did take about 6 weeks. We can go into further detail, but I can tell you we had Deputy Chief Burke, Max Kirschbaum, both fire and police chiefs, and other staff in the organization doing everything they possibly could to get this available as quickly as possible. I think it's actually come at a pretty good time now It's very costly, and we are spending our money at a time when it's really providing some effective understanding of the infection rate of our workforce. But Max Kirschbaum, would you mind coming on and maybe filling any gaps and inviting our public safety chiefs on where you see appropriate?
Thank you, Mr. Tripp. This is Max Kirschbaum, Public Works and Utilities. Don covered it pretty well. The trigger to move forward with this effort to do the research and then obtain the contract also arose at a period of time in which the CARES money could be made available for such a purpose. So that was also a key aspect in terms of driving the timing of it. And as we learned, as we got into the research part, Don said it was approved about 6 weeks prior. That is a true statement, but the landscape continues to change throughout that in terms of what providers were and are available to meet the specific needs that we had, as well as which tests were the most appropriate for the needs of the 3 departments in terms of false positive, false negatives, and turnaround times. So those answers seemed to change almost on a daily basis until we finally got to a point where we were comfortable to proceed forward with nailing down the contract with Advanced Urgent Care. And that's what drove that's what brings us here tonight as ratification, is that we use the authorities that were available to go ahead and move forward with that contract as quickly as possible once it was nailed down. In terms of the employees that it applies to, they are very much in keeping with the objectives of continuity of operation of some of the more key functions of the city, which we've discussed with council going back to the beginning of the pandemic period, that being fire, police, and utility plant operations. So the employees that it applies to are not all of the employees, but very specifically identified employees in fire, police, and water and wastewater plant operations. That's all I have to add. If there are either specific questions for PD or fire, I think they are Bob Hose or Tim Carlson are both available. And if you had any additional legal questions, I know Dave Frankel would be happy to answer those as well.
A specific question I don't think the chiefs could answer, and I don't know if it's HR or not, and typically that's not something that we get into. But if I'm to vote on something that we're funding, that we're mandatorily making people do, that quite frankly, I'm uncomfortable with mandatorily making people take these tests. I understand the need for them, and going back to April, I had asked about them because I understand the need for them. But what happens if somebody says, no, I don't want to do that?
We believe this is a requirement, and it is a requirement of the workplace. And like any other requirement of the workplace, if someone refused to do this test, they'd be subject to discipline. And depending upon those circumstances, any disciplinary procedure towards an individual could be appealed to me. So that's the process internally. But we're very serious about this. And I would say that I think both chiefs would be happy to come on to say that their workforce, in fact, is very supportive as a workforce of this. And we think it's in the best interest of not only our employees, but also the community, in keeping our public safety and utility workers without the virus, and to keep our operations in place. Mr. Frankel, if you'd like to add anything, you're welcome to do that. And if Chief Carlson or Chief Hose would like to come on and add anything, I'll invite you forward now.
Thank you, Mr. Tripp. Dave Frankel, City Attorney. I have been having well, Ron Arguello has been assisting HR with this process, and Mr. Arguello is available if you have questions as to how the personnel process would be implicated as a result of mandatory testing of employees. So, Mr. Arguello, if you could.
Thank you. Can you all hear me?
Yes, sir, we can.
So Mr. Frankel did ask me to research this, especially in the mandating aspect, as no one really likes to be told whether that they're going to get a test or a vaccine or anything like that. As you may or may not know, employers have the right to require testing for specific things. However, being a governmental entity, we have more stringent requirements because we are bound by the Fourth Amendment, whereas private employers are not. And so in researching this and talking with the EEOC and looking at the case law, we are allowed to require testing so long as a reasonable search under the Fourth Amendment. In this case, reasonableness is determined not simply by a warrant, as most people understand, but also by a factor of whether or not the governmental interest outweigh any private interest in their, I guess in this case, it'd be their bodily fluids or any kind of cells from their body, which would be that nasal swab. Much like when you're looking at a blood test for drugs and alcohol, that would be an invasion of the body for their medical purposes of diagnosing or testing. So in this case, because of the severity of the disease, how quickly and how contagious it is, the EEOC has given guidance on this to indicate that it would be a reasonable, depending upon the policies, who it's applied to, the reasons for it, to require this testing under governmental employers as well. So I think that we do need to have a reasonable basis stated in order to show why we are doing this. And I believe that Max Kirschbaum and the police and fire have done so to say that this is only going to apply to those people who need the continuity of services to make sure we're able to provide those critical government functions. So it would be considered something from an HR standpoint that this is a requirement under our personnel rules to receive testing when required, and if they don't, they are subject to discipline. That doesn't mean that they will be disciplined, but it means that we can go through our personnel rules and policies if they fail to do testing, just as if they fail to follow instructions from their supervisor or fail to do anything else within the personnel rules and policies.
I appreciate all that explanation and I understand it. And to me, just because the law says you can do something doesn't mean you ought to do something. And I think that when you talk about what's reasonable and what's not, it's very subjective. I think what you thought was reasonable in February of 2019 probably is very different from this part of 2020 or into 2021. For me, it's crossed the line where we're going too far, in my opinion. And so with that being said, I will not be voting to fund this, but I appreciate the background. I appreciate the fact that we take this serious, as do I, hence why I asked if we were going to be having tests available back in April. I just think that if, 9 months in, I feel like we've fared pretty well, thank goodness. And I just don't see this needing to be a step that we take. So, I want to at least share my thoughts about why I'll be voting no to fund this.
Councilor Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And kind of tailing off the question of whether or not it will be mandatory. I had sent in this question earlier today is, what do we mean by routine testing? Does that mean that every time I show up to work, I take this test? Or does that mean that I have a weekend off, I show up that week, and then I take one test? What does that testing routine look like?
Councilor Smith, this is Max Kirschbaum. The frequency of testing envisioned under this contract is the intent is different for each of the three departments because work schedules are so greatly different in the three departments. But the intent is to, among the identified employees in three departments, to provide an approximately weekly testing for each of those employees. Again, based on whether they are a a firefighter with a 4896 or a shift worker at a plant or a shift worker in PD. Those frequencies are going to be different for each of those employees, but the testing that we have available occurs frequently enough that we can meet the need of each of the departments.
Okay. And are these tests showing, for example, let's say that I had COVID, overcame it in April. If I take the test now, and it's mandatory, does this test show that I have COVID? I guess it would be antibodies that I would have developed. Would it show that I'm positive? Like, how would we know if I'm infectious or not? Because it would show up as positive, I would assume, if I've had it. So how would we know I'm still able to work?
Councilor Smith, excuse me, I'm sorry. I'd like to bring
infectious, yeah.
I'd like to bring on Deputy Chief Eric Burke, who is our foremost expert on details of the testing as well as issues like you just mentioned with antibodies. And he's prepared to answer your question. Eric, could you come on, please?
Yes, thank you, Max. This is Eric Burke, Deputy Chief of Operations for the Fire Department speaking. Mayor, councilors, thank you for the opportunity. Councilor Smith, thank you for the question. This type of testing is antigen testing. This type of test is most accurate when it's in the initial period of illness, usually within the first 5 to 7 days of an illness. So it tests for a specific protein that is present during that period of time. So if somebody were to have an infection weeks prior or a month prior, it most likely would not produce a positive test because it is testing for those antigens that are present very early in the illness. As the illness extends, those proteins dissipate. So this type of antigen test most likely would not produce a positive test with someone with an infection greater than 7 days or longer, depending on the duration of illness.
Okay, thank you very much. And I'm not sure if you're the person to answer this next question, but how many municipalities, jurisdictions are doing this type of testing, and specifically with these 3 departments that we are focused on?
Thank you for the question. I could not provide an exact number of how many municipalities have a similar approach or encountering testing just the same way that we are. I do know that there are other fire agencies in our area, North Area region, some are neighboring jurisdiction, as well as fire jurisdictions in the southern part of the state that are also doing weekly testing. Some are doing weekly antigen testing, some are doing weekly PCR testing. I've seen information of other local law enforcement agencies that are starting to incorporate this type of testing as well. But the exact number I could not provide at this time.
Okay. Thank you for those answers. It's helpful. Just based on my principle of personal choice and what happens with my health and other people's health, very different. I understand that we're taking into consideration not only our staff, but those that we serve. And this is a difficult decision because through this whole pandemic, there's been multiple perspectives on any which way. And so it's hard because you have doctors saying one thing and doctors saying another thing, and they could be on the same page, but have different data. And so it's very, very hard to pinpoint and narrow down what actually is going to be the best for each individual. And since I believe in individual personal choice, I just can't get on board with moving this forward. It's not something that I believe should be mandated to test. But again, I appreciate where what we're trying to do for safety purposes. But again, I believe that it should be individual choice. So thank you.
Councilor Scully.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will be voting yes for this bill tonight, this councilor's bill tonight. I believe that this is a significant step in keeping each other safe and making sure that we all can get back to opening up as fully as possible and back to a normal schedule again. So I will be voting yes tonight.
Other comments from the council members? One of the things I would be concerned about not having these kind of tests is that we could have an individual on a shift that could come in and infect an entire shift in our fire department or our police department. And we could potentially lose that whole shift of staff to support emergency services. And I haven't seen anything from any member of any of these groups that have said that they are objecting to providing testing. I've heard nothing from either of the chiefs that said that they're getting kickback or pushback from their members. Doesn't mean that individuals don't have opinions, but in order to protect the safety and ability of our city to function and provide complete shifts, and also to provide safety of our employees and the community at large, we can't afford to lose entire shifts out of fire houses or off police patrols. I think this is a very small thing to ask of our employees, is to take a test. And we're not talking about inoculations, we're talking about a swab test. Chief Carlson, I think you had a comment. So would you like to respond?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and good evening, council. Thank you for all your comments and questions. If I could just make a couple points to some of the discussion that you have had here tonight. I would like to address the fact that we have been trying to get testing for some time. And the fact that it's mandatory now, particularly with this latest spike, and the reason for it is, in my opinion, to protect our workforce. Number one, to protect the individuals, the workforce itself, their families, and also the community, to ensure the community that the people we're putting out to provide these services are in fact free from the virus as best we can tell. One of the urgent matters for me in getting this testing, the PCR testing, which is the most accurate, up from March until October 9th, our workforce reported one positive COVID test. From middle of October until just last week, we've had over 27 positive tests, including a death of one of our civilian employees and also a death of a spouse of one of our detectives recently. Now, for me, the mandating of the testing means that our employees protect each other and they protect their families. This is a minimally intrusive test, which simply checks for the antibodies and allows us to remove from the workforce somebody who is infected but asymptomatic. And that, to me, is a crucial piece of the testing, so that's why we support it. Now, when it's mandatory, and as Mr. Arguello pointed out, it can certainly lead to discipline, as any other personnel issue could. However, we're working with our employees to make sure they understand the testing, how it's done, why it's done, and all of those things. And we've had very little pushback on it. And that there was some issues with the initial testing. It was really intrusive. The nasal swab and the sinuses, they've since made that less intrusive with the same results. So I'm in favor of this. It's a very important piece in my mind for our workforce to keep them safe and to ensure the public that who we put out there is free from the virus as best we can. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Other comments or questions from council or from staff? Any other comments? All right, seeing no other comments. Ms. Fitch, this is item 10D, please.
Counselor Demott.
No.
Counselor Demott votes no. Counselor Seymour.
Yes.
Counselor Seymour votes yes. Counselor Scully.
Yes.
Counselor Scully votes yes. Counselor Smith.
No.
Counselor Smith votes no. Counselor Bowles.
Yes.
Counselor Bowles votes yes. And Mayor Atchison.
Yes.
Mayor Atchison votes yes.
All right, so this item 10D passes on a 4-2 vote. Moving on to the next item, this is discussion on response to COVID. Council, I know it's still early in the meeting, but if you want a short break before we start this, this could be a rather lengthy discussion. So let's take 8:25 and we'll return. So you have just about 6 minutes. 8:25. All right, we're waiting on one member of council to return. As soon as that person's back online, we'll reconvene. All right, Ms. Fitch, just for the record, it's 8:26. All members of the council are back. We want to make sure we're back on the recording. Mr. Tripp, let's turn to our weekly discussion on COVID and any presentations we have.
Certainly, Mr. Mayor, thank you. Actually, I think we can get through this pretty expeditiously. The issues are pretty straightforward. First of all, we'll start with Max Kirschbaum, who will provide an update to our data, which we provide to you every week and have for, my gosh, 9 months now. For one of the first times, we have a little good news, I believe, and it's not perfect and it's not certain, but there's some reason for optimism. Following that, Deputy City Manager Dorr will give you the requested update on CARES funding. As the mayor mentioned before, we're in line to have all already spent and received approval of our expenditures on that. He'll give you a summary of where that money was allocated per your previous direction. And finally, we're going to speak about restaurants tonight. We have a couple of programmatic options for you. We have some thoughts for you on that. We've done some research as was requested, and we'll provide that to you and give you a chance to provide me feedback as to what you'd like to see us do as next steps. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tripp. Matt, if you could bring up the first slide for the case data, please. Next slide. Okay. Mayor and Council, similar to the report we provided to you last week, the good news, again, is that you'll notice that all the arrows on this chart are in the downward direction. They all seem to be still following a trend line of a slow and steady downward trend in each of the indicators. So that is a piece of good news. If you compare these to the data today, because as you remember, what you're seeing in this chart here is data as of Friday to make sure that it's all similarly compared. But the data that's available today, just before this meeting started, you would see the numbers continue that slow decline. State number of cases shown here on the slide, 821. As of today, it's down to about 750. Adams County showing 926 as of Friday. It is now down to 858. And Jefferson County, 732 here on this slide, 619 today. Similarly, the percentages are slightly down. Statewide, the Adams County numbers are, and Jefferson County numbers are, in terms of percent positivity, are actually slightly up from the two numbers shown on here, but relatively in the same ballpark. So that's good. Next slide is hospitalization. Again, you'll still see that downward trend. The data here, the latest date on there is as of December 20th. And on December 20th, which is yesterday's information, that was at 1398. Just before today's meeting, that number is at 1386 total hospitalized, and that includes confirmed plus persons under investigation in the hospital. So that's also positive. While that number is positive on the state CDPHE website, it does continue to say that more than 20% of hospitals across the state still anticipate staff shortages within the next 2 weeks. So That's pretty consistent with the kind of reporting that has been there for the last several weeks. Subject to your questions, that's all I have to present this evening.
Any questions from council? All right, thank you, Mr. Kirschbaum.
Thank you, Mayor and members of City Council. This is Larry Dorr, Chief Financial Officer and Deputy City Manager. Last week, staff was asked to provide an update on the CARES Act financial activities. This federal legislation may be unfamiliar to some of our residents, so I wanted to provide a bit of background and a timeline as well. CARES is an acronym that stands for Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security. It's an act of Congress. It was passed on March 27th of this year. Mr. Williams, if you would kindly put up that first slide of mine, I'd appreciate that, sir. Thank you. The act provided funds to states, counties, and some cities, including Westminster. The act allowed for specific uses of the funds and had a very strict deadline for disbursements of December 30th of this year. Given this narrow window to have funds dispersed into the community, the staff and council have been very attentive to this timeline and the potential for helping the Westminster community. So we want to provide this update as the deadline is very fast approaching. Accordingly, council appropriated $9 million, the full amount that was expected to be received on May 18th, with the intent of having a thoughtful impact on the community. Further, on September 28th, council made a finding that the city's police and fire personnel were substantially dedicated to mitigating the impacts of the coronavirus, and this made pay and benefits for those employees eligible under the CARES Act. On October 29th, the city received its final receipt of CARES funds. The funds are received in advance and then dispersed for various uses as appropriate. I just want to first thank all of those who have been dedicated to dispersing funds for the benefit of the community. A number of city staff have been working on this tirelessly, and I just want to give thanks for all of that hard work and dedication. And Mr. Williams, if you would just advance to the next slide, I will describe how funds have been dispersed, and you see percents of the total dollar amount on the pie chart. Those correspond to the dollar amounts to the right. And as you'll see, substantially $5.8 million or 64% have been dispersed for those public safety, health, and payroll expenses. Of course, Mayor and Council, you've been very closely updated on all of the small business grants that have been ongoing. In fact, we just had an update at your most recent meeting from Jenny Grafton, and we've described a number of the impacts that have resulted from that. Third, in terms of magnitude, has been the housing assistance, and the city has partnered with Maker Housing in providing assistance to our residents, $520,000 or about 6% of total CARES. You'll recall, it feels like a long time ago now, but very early on, the CARES Act provided for hazard pay for those of our workers on the front line for about 6 weeks of their activity at that time. And then we have provided for, of course, all of this online hardware and software that's enabled us to continue our city council meetings and our internal functions as a city operations through GoToMeeting software, various telecommuting equipment that has enabled us to continue to provide services to the community. And then, of course, I have a bit of a catch-all here at other, about 2% of our total, or about $150,000. That is a bit of a catch-all and describes a number of different items, a lot of different personal protective equipment and small goods. So with that, I just wanted to let you know that a full $9 million has been reported to the counties, the 2 counties, Adams and Jefferson, proportionately for the amount that the city has been received. We've provided the line item details to the 2 chief financial officers at each of the 2 counties, and we have actually responded to some questions that we received earlier on this summer, and have not had any follow-on questions since our last report was filed. And essentially, we have all of our evidence and all of the records of our receipts and disbursements, and so we feel that we are in compliance of all of the elements of the CARES Act and are prepared for any further disclosures or any audits that may be undertaken in the future. So I'm pleased to report that City of Westminster has dispersed and received all of its funds related to CARES, and thankfully was able to get those federal tax dollars, which really belong to our Westminster residents. They're the ones who've paid these taxes to the federal government. We've been able to bring them back to our own communities. So thank you for allowing me to provide this brief update. We'll be providing more information in detail, as I mentioned earlier tonight, on the city's website that will essentially be comparable to what's been reported to the counties, so that anyone interested in further detail would be able to see that. So with that, Mayor and Council, I'll be happy to answer any questions, and we'll go forward from there. Thank you.
Council, any questions on Mr. Doerr's report? Mr. Doerr, I'm not seeing any questions at this time, so thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Smith, do you have a question for Mr. Doerr?
Yes, please. Are we able to get these slides sent to us?
Certainly.
Thank you.
Mr. Tripp, the next person.
I'm the next person. I'd like to, as we transition here, I'd like to thank Adams County, because in addition to the money that we had of our own, Adams County's provided us some funds for testing sites that we had at the MAC and Front Range Community College. And I want to thank Ray Gonzalez and their Board of Commissioners for their participation there. That was important to us. Now I'd like to transition into speaking to you about a subject that you're very interested in, that's restaurants. This has been a horrifically difficult situation for our many restaurants in our community. As you have been very concerned about all of our restaurants and have been looking for any support we can provide to get them through this dark time that's been created by the regulations with COVID. You have been there as a council to support us with several economic assistance packages. We've provided other soft support in the way of public relations and promotions by purchasing meals from them for other things that other services we're providing in the community. We've worked to change regulations. We've done essentially everything we could think of to try to support that part of our industry. Tonight, we have an opportunity to do two more things. There's two programs that are out there for your consideration. Both of these can be moved forward quickly under my emergency authorization to come back later and to have you ratify. And I'm going to really go right to each one of these very specifically, and then we've got folks that can provide you background information. The first is a proposed cap on delivery fees to help Westminster residents get their food to customers and continue to make a profit. We also recognize the value of this delivery service that it has in many ways in providing needed employment in our community. If you'd like, Jenny Grafton and the staff in economic development over the course of the past week have done a lot of research talking to restaurants and the delivery service industry. And I report to you tonight that both restaurants and the delivery services that we've made contact do support this cap emergency ordinance that we are going to be recommending that we proceed with. City Attorney Frankel, when I get done here, can speak to the detail of that. The second item that's come up very recently is Colorado's proposed 5-star program. This is very different, completely separate from what I just mentioned with delivery fees. The 5-star program was started in Mesa County with some success, and it's a program that allows a local jurisdiction to certify that restaurants have gone through certain regulations and made certain changes to make it safer to have those restaurants reopen. This would allow for inside, indoor, in-place dining. The 5-star program, after compliance with these regulations, would allow for this indoor dining. The 5-star program, though, is fraught with many processes to communicate properly, to license, and to provide inspections and management. And there really aren't folks to do that. But I do have a bit of good news. Both of our counties, Adams and Jeffco, are working on being the agents for submitting an application for permission to participate in the 5-star program. Adams County right now cannot submit because we're under a public health order. That public health order expires on January 7th. In speaking with Jefferson County just this afternoon, their county manager right now is working on an application for Jefferson County. So I'm here tonight to tell you that one or the other or both may be able to come forward with this. And our suggestion to you is that we would get on board with whichever city is able to do that first. When we consider all of this, we recommend, of course, the delivery cap program now. And we also think we should work with our counties and the state to get our restaurants back open for indoor dining as quickly as possible, as they were up until November 20th. As soon as either county receives approval for the 5-star program, we recommend that we follow this opportunity for all of Westminster. If that doesn't happen, even though we are in the red at this time, we are trending downward. We'd also suggest that we make contact with the counties and with the state, and I would suggest that maybe we write a letter on your behalf that explains that, on November 20th when we closed, I looked at these numbers tonight that Max provided. Our numbers were actually much higher than what we have today. We were just trending in a bad direction. We were trending up. We're now trending down. So, we'd like to see the state consider, even within the red that would be there until we get to 350, that there be some latitude to maybe open our restaurants up at the 25% level. So to not confuse you too much, let me just explain. We recommend that we do proceed with the delivery fee cap, and that we continue to monitor the 5-star program, and whenever that becomes available to us, we act on that quickly. I want to ask City Attorney Frankel if he wouldn't mind explaining kind of the content of what he's recommending in terms of an ordinance that we would put into place immediately, if that's your pleasure tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Tripp. And so just to follow up on the points that you were making, Mr. Tripp, not to confuse the matter, but the 5-star dining program is essentially a variance that a county can apply for from the state CDPHE orders, which right now are at level red and do not allow for in-person dining, inside dining. We can only dine at facilities that have licensed outdoor premises in our city at this point. In addition to outdoor dining, obviously you can do takeout. A lot of the takeout is what's keeping our restaurants going. But those variances that can be applied for by both Jefferson County and Adams County are what Mr. Tripp is referencing. Now, to jump to the third-party delivery fee cap proposal, the interest in City Council led staff to investigate what other jurisdictions, comparable jurisdictions, neighbors of our city have undertaken in an effort to assist their restaurants from whom they have had a significant outpouring of concern that the delivery fees were essentially causing restaurants to operate at a loss on these orders that they receive through the services. And before detailing the content of what I would propose for consideration, I would ask that Ms. Grafton present, because I know she's done a lot of research through our economic development department and can provide some very important information for background on this issue. Ms. Grafton?
Thank you, Mr. Frankel. Matt, I am not certain if you received the slides that I sent. If you did, and we could put them up. There we go. They're just mostly here for council's reference. So as Mr. Frankel said, really the issue that we are hearing from the restaurants is that the cost of participating in the programs is exorbitant for them. They're operating at a loss, but not participating puts them at a competitive disadvantage. And so it's a little bit helpful if we just break down what that delivery service model of those third-party platforms looks like. And there really is a layering of fees and costs that are not always well understood by the consumer. So as a customer ordering through DoorDash, Grubhub, any of those, we're paying a delivery fee as well as a tip that goes to the driver. Those are pretty well understood. What a lot of us don't see is that the restaurants participating in those platforms are then also paying a commission for that service. And that's really where the rub comes in. Those commission costs are up to 35% of a total food bill that the restaurant is then paying to that service. There are still some additional add-on fees and services that those companies provide. The way that the ordinance is drafted does not prohibit them from continuing to subscribe to those additional services. It's simply addressing that portion that is the commission. The delivery services, of course, are the ones paying the drivers and for the operation of the platform. We want to ensure that the drivers are not put at a disadvantage through this proposed ordinance. They would still continue to receive their normal fees and 100% of the tip. The ordinance is worded in such a way that that cannot be changed. So we ensure that the drivers are not then having to make up for fee reductions in other areas. Next slide, please. So with limited time, we weren't able to reach all of our restaurants, but we did reach out with email to all of those who have either applied for or received one of our grants through the course of the year, as well as those who have participated in the expanded outdoor dining program. And so in the course of reaching out to those 76 restaurant and tavern owners, we received responses back from 22 of them. This was, again, a pretty short period of time. And the vast majority, 20 of them, were very supportive, some heartily so, of asking the city to impose a temporary cap of 15% on those third-party delivery services. This has become very customary in current times, not only in Metro Denver, but really across the country. Cities from New York City to San Francisco have followed suit, and 15% is really very typical. We did hear from 2 restaurants that were neutral, neither supportive nor against. And their reason was really simply that they didn't feel this was an area where the city needed to step in and play a role. Many of them stated that they felt they had to use these services as a way of maintaining visibility to their customers. They expressed that when they don't subscribe and don't show up in a search, of course, then they are simply not selected among the competition. And I believe that was exactly what Mr. Brown, who spoke earlier during citizen comment, was alluding to. For some of the larger ones, they are operating with some of their own delivery services by utilizing wait staff that cannot currently serve in the restaurant. But that is not a viable option for a lot of our smaller restaurants. We also spoke to city staff and a restaurant owner in a neighboring jurisdiction just to see if they had noticed an impact upon passage of a cap there. And they did say that they had seen an uptick in customers calling the restaurants directly to place their orders as opposed to going through the services. Next slide, please. Did want to share with you a couple of, we did receive several testimonials. This is just a sampling of 2 from our restaurant owners who were really making a plea for consideration of this matter. Very, very similar. It's really attesting to the profit margins that have been so drastically reduced under these conditions. And last slide, please. So moving forward, I would like council to be aware that we have reached out to the 3 largest delivery services. Really only DoorDash and Grubhub are operating in Westminster. Uber Eats is not much of a market force. They were very appreciative that we had reached out to them proactively and have had a good record in other areas of voluntary compliance when they are part of this process. So if council would elect to move forward, we would certainly provide the information from an ordinance to them as soon as possible. They would then begin to shift their platform that they work with the restaurants on to make the changes in how that billing is set up. They said it takes them about 1 to 2 weeks to actually modify that. However, they do go back and rebate those costs to the restaurants to the effective date. We are proposing for Westminster that we would handle any complaints through our Operations and Community Preservation Manager. This is our code compliance section, because they're already equipped to do this. In this case, it is a matter of a restaurant owner making a complaint to the city staff person for follow-up with those third-party delivery services. And lastly, really significant part of this, there are many of us who I think have felt we were operating in good faith and trying to support our restaurants as we reached out and used those third-party services, not knowing what it was doing to the restaurants. So we would like to look for some ways to provide some additional information and support to the community, how to really help your local restaurants in the best way possible for you. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
I've got a couple in the queue, Jenny. Counselor Seymour, you were up first.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Not a specific comment to Ms. Grafton, but I did hear from one specific restaurant owner that I do know well, and he was against the proposal, but that just adds one out of the 23 then that would be on there. I'm not sure if this is the best time for my comments or if anyone else has specific questions of Ms. Grafton. I'll hold mine until we're done.
Okay, Counselor DeMott.
I've talked to quite a few people in regards to this, and including State Representative Byrd, and I appreciate that she gave me some time on this because I know she's done some work on this down at the Capitol. So I'm really two heads of it, honestly. I think there's no secret that I'm a free market person, and I really think the sad part of this is that government intervention is what's causing this. To me, the real solution is to let businesses operate. I think the restaurant business in particular is one of those businesses that knows how to control germs. They've been doing it, since anybody opened their door that has a restaurant that's worth anything and stays in business, is because they know how to maintain a good facility that has good, clean eating standards. So, and I know that's above the city, but it causes me frustration that I think we've, in a lot of ways, created an environment where we're pitting businesses against each other. I did today, however, hear from someone who drives for one of these entities, and unimportant about which one, and something that they shared with me. I'm curious if Ms. Grafton had heard, because in your slides you said that it won't hurt the delivery driver, and I was told that certain ones of these, I don't know if it's all of them, but that part of that commission does actually go to the driver. And I don't know, again, I heard this from somebody who drives for one of these businesses, and that gave me some additional pause to this, because a lot of the people who are driving right now are people who are out of work service workers. So they're doing this to try to make up their lost income. So I am concerned about that and how it might impact those folks. And I guess the other thing I'd ask, so that you could answer all my concerns at once, I want to be crystal clear, if I were to support this, which I'm not saying for sure whether I will or not, that it is an absolute, it ends when the shutdown ends. I don't want this to be some sort of precedent that this is the way that we're going to control free markets, because the reality is it's supply and demand. People are willing to pay more money for things like Uber Eats because it's convenient. Just like if I go to 7-Eleven, maybe I pay $2 for a bottle of cold water because it's convenient, even though I could buy a case for $1 more at Costco. I mean, that's the way the market works. It's supply and demand. If somebody wants something and is willing to pay for it, they do.
Certainly I can.
Oh,
Go ahead.
Ms. Grafton, if you'd like to go first, I will definitely glad to follow up with the draft that I've got for consideration.
Okay, thank you. So to the point of the delivery drivers, They do receive a fee, but I suppose what I should clarify, what I was referencing in the language of the proposed ordinance is that 100% of the tip remains with the driver. And that was a protection, actually the Colorado Restaurant Association, who has asked municipalities to place these caps, did state that it needed to contain language that ensures 100% of delivery tips go to drivers. So that was what I was referring to. Whether or not different companies are then also paying drivers a portion of the commission, I can't speak to that part.
Well, and I think that that's an important thing people to realize, because what was explained to me is say you get a small order, and that's the only order you got, that whole hour. You could essentially be working for less than minimum wage, and that could happen as it is. But what was explained to me from the driver who has been depending on this income is that they did feel that this was going to hurt them, because it hurts the structure in which they get part of their compensation, delivering for one of these services.
So, Councilor, if I could respond. So it's my goal to get council direction on this question tonight, whether council wants to move forward with an order. And procedurally, the way I contemplated this happening was to get your direction tonight, and if there is consensus to move forward, I'd like to incorporate your comments into an order for the city manager to sign under his authority, and that order then would come on a council meeting agenda for consideration at your next meeting. This would be a way to immediately take action if this issue is one that council directs staff to pursue. So the way we've drafted the proposal, we wanted to be consistent with neighboring jurisdictions so that there wouldn't be confusion as to deliveries on one side of a border versus the other side of the border. We wanted our local limit on the third-party fees to be consistent, and it's our understanding that 15% is the figure that other nearby jurisdictions have adopted in terms of their desire to cap the fees. We have also built into the proposed order a provision explicitly directing that third-party food delivery programs shall not reduce the compensation rates paid to their delivery service drivers or garnish gratuities in order to comply with this order. I think that was driven by a desire not to have the drivers bear this burden, but rather have the 30% that was being charged to the restaurants reduced to 15%. It is also contemplated in the proposed order that there would be very transparent accounting on receipts, that the receipts provided to customers of these services would show the purchase price of the food, sales taxes, delivery or service fees as a line item, tips as a line item, and any commission associated with the transaction as a line item, just so that customers who utilize the services are informed as to what is being paid and by whom. We have drafted the ordinance or the emergency order, try to be consistent, as a civil violation, so it would not be a criminal violation. It would be any complaints that were made under this would be directed to the City of Westminster's Community Development Department, Operations and Community Preservation Division. They would be the personnel that would field the calls. We would anticipate calls being rather limited and predominantly coming from restaurants if restaurants continued to be charged more than 15%. The proposal would also be a very limited duration, and it would expire on March 31st of 2021. So this would effectively be for 3 months and a week in duration. So if those general parameters generate discussion and feedback, staff is definitely receptive and hoping to get some direction as to the direction City Council would like us to move in.
And Mr. Frankel, so on the time, can you repeat for me? Mine got kind of choppy when you were stating the portion, like what's the end? Is the end
March 31st. So this would end on March 31st. And if council's desire is for us to move forward, I can have this ready for the city manager's signature, and it could go into effect tomorrow. So yes.
Why did we choose a time instead of tying it to the restaurant dine-in shutdown?
My understanding is that nearby jurisdictions took that very same approach to go through March as a way to make it a very defined, limited period of time. Certainly, council could revoke this at any time if you chose to. If restaurants were reopened, hopefully sooner than later, and this is no longer necessary, absolutely, council can revoke it at any time. But for the way it was drafted, we were trying to just be consistent with other cities and go to March 31st.
Okay, two other things, and then I'll pass the talking stick. One thing that I would like some more, and I might have to do digging on my own, but you know, the thing about the percentage, like, I'm glad that we're trying to protect all parties, including the drivers, but if the percent decreases and they get their compensation off of that, you know, we are decreasing the drivers' percentage. And so I have a big heart. A lot of these restaurant owners are neighbors, friends, family, but so are the people who are driving for these services. So it's such a difficult place that I know everybody is in. So I'm just trying to make sure that we're cognizant of that. So if we go forward with this, just so I understand operationally how this would work, is the city manager could put this in place and it goes active as when he does that, and then we codify that at our next meeting. If I guess the rub for me is understanding that is I'm still on the fence about it. So that I don't want to put staff in a place where they move forward with something and then I come in 2 weeks, I'm like, yeah, I'm not comfortable with it. So, and just, so everybody can know where I'm at, I'd like to hear where my colleagues are at, because that'll help me make my decision. But am I right that that's how it would all operationally go down?
Correct, sir. The city manager emergency order could be signed tomorrow, go into effect tomorrow. It would then be on your agenda for consideration. Council could choose to ratify this emergency order and continue it in effect, or council could choose to end it at your next meeting if that was your desire.
Okay. Last thing I'll say quickly is thank you, Ms. Grafton, for all the work on this, and whatever other staff, Dave, your team, and because I know this was a short ask and you guys put something together quickly for us to look at, and I appreciate it.
Mr. Frankel, before we move to the next person, and Councilor Seymour, I'm coming back to you next. The temporary piece about this is also in line with the legislation that was passed in the special session, as Representative Byrd has indicated in conversations with the city manager and myself, is that legislation was set up to be a temporary basis. It was not meant to be long-term. So I think part of that 90-day period in there that she identified in the legislation is also supportive of that temporary, not to be long-term, which I think supports Councilor DeMont's question.
Can I, Mr. Mayor, since you brought that up, can I ask a question on that to clarify? When I spoke to Representative Byrd, she stated to me, and maybe I misunderstood this, but that the state order, though, really didn't necessarily apply to us, that the city, in her mind, if I understood her right, that we could have done this as a home rule city anyway, that really their legislation was around counties. And that's why I'm so sensitive about, like, what's the stop line, understanding that state mandate, when it expires, doesn't necessarily overrule like our local authority. Is that true?
That's my understanding, and we still have local control, but it was in the legislation that pushes it down to the local control of those who have home rule authority, I'll say.
That's my opinion as well, in that the home rule municipalities had already enacted some of these same provisions prior to the special legislative session. I think that the state landed in a very consistent place to where the other home rule municipalities that have gone here landed. But I do believe that we have home rule authority to do this independent of the state's action.
Thank you.
Councilor Seymour.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Quite honestly, I agonized over this thought this weekend because I have a belief that if government is the answer to the fix, then we've got a bigger problem. Ronald Reagan said that, but restaurants have a special place in my heart. And I too know a lot of the local owners. Unfortunately, there's not an open market now because government has stripped that open market and created a situation where the restaurants have little choices. So I would be favor of a temporary ordinance. And then two, I would hope if by some means with inoculations and the vaccine that we have a different standing that my fellow counselors would join in taking this off the books before the 31st if necessary. But I think that would be the maximum amount of time that I would have to think about, to put this on. Because then after that, there is an open market. Restaurants have paid a heavy burden and a heavy price. And quite honestly, I could spend 2 hours talking about how and why of that too, and the issues that go along with the 5-star program too, where we're putting out a carrot and then we're hitting them with a stick. And a very moving target too. So I'm reluctantly in favor of this ordinance as we're talking about it right now.
Councilor Bowles?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to very briefly kind of join in the conversation. A lot of great points made here. I think Mr. Brown, who spoke a public comment earlier tonight, raised some really good points. And over the weekend, I heard from either 3 or 4 different owners of restaurants, and they were all in support of this. It's just a matter of fairness. They have a profit margin in the restaurants of roughly 10 to 12%. They're being charged right now 20 to 30%. So the numbers kind of speak for themselves. So I will be supporting this tonight. I think some restaurant owners, in my way of thinking, gave me some good reasons why they support it. And I think Mr. Brown and I did a good job in his public comment. And I would, to Councilor Seymour's point, would I support lifting the ban if circumstances change or if warrant lifting the ban? I would. If that's something we can do, I definitely would be there with you on letting the marketplace rule, which is what we want. But right now, it's just a really not a good situation for restaurants, obviously. So I would support this. And if it means lifting the ban before the 31st, if that's something we need to do because circumstances, the market's changed, I would support that. So thank you.
Councilor Smith?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Much to like my colleagues and what Councilor Seymour and Councilor DeMott have raised with free market principles, I follow in line with that. We're not there. We've had too much government interference through this whole pandemic. And so I just can't, it's hard to really balance where that fine line is. So this isn't a decision that's taken lightly as far as looking at the pros and cons. When this first came up, I was mostly against it because it does go against principle of free market practices. But learning a little bit more about this and hearing feedback, not only from my colleagues, but from restaurant owners, doing my due diligence, I committed to talking with a couple restaurant owners that I know. It is, most of them are in favor of this, but I've heard some concerns about it too. So not to berate the same subject here, but I think that I would be in favor of this with a hard deadline. And Mr. Frankel, I found it and find it very helpful that I believe it's once a month at a council meeting that you remind us of our emergency order and where we're at with that. So I'd very much appreciate that if that's part of this condition of this resolution moving forward to remind us that it's out there, that we need to make sure that we don't lose track of where we're at on it. So that's something that I would like to add to this. But overall, I'm in support of this.
Other comments from council?
Councilor Smith, if I could respond, yes, the monthly updates, I do intend to continue those with regard to the state of emergency that was declared by council back in March. I will absolutely include this and all other emergency regulations in effect in that monthly update. And I have been doing those on the first meeting of each month. So I will intend to continue with that practice. Thank you.
One of the things that council is aware of, they were sent a copy of an email that was received from the Westminster Chamber earlier this afternoon, so you can read that as well as you contemplate your final decision. The other thing that I would ask staff, and this is a question that had come up earlier, on some of the receipts that's being given to customers upon delivery, there have been indications that there was something called a Westminster fee or a Thornton fee that was over and above all this. The city is not charging a fee. We have never received any reimbursements from any of the carriers or the third-party delivery people for a fee. Is there a way that we can get that straightened out? Because it's confusing to people who have the delivery that there's something that the city is also adding to this on those receipts that gives the impression that Westminster is collecting money off of it, and we're not. Is there a way that Ms. Grafton or Mr. Frankel, either one, that we can get that cleared up so that that's more appropriate? If it's just a delivery fee, that's the third party's delivery fee, not the city's.
That understanding is correct. I'm not certain if we, and I'll let Mr. Frankel speak to this, if we can require them to label it or list it differently. However, part of the provisions of the ordinance is that the receipt is fully itemized, and that had not been happening before. So if it is enacted, it would not only indicate purchase price of the food, sales tax, delivery charge, it would also state the commission associated with the transaction. Mr. Frankel, do you want to speak to whether or not we could intervene in how it's identified on the receipt?
So the itemization that we are modeling this from is that which is required by our neighboring jurisdictions. So I was hoping that we would not be necessarily driving a whole different reporting system than other cities have required. But I do believe that the itemization, to the extent that it does differentiate between all of the items that, as we've discussed, could shed some light on the, if Mr. Mayor, if your question is what the fees actually break down to, are you concerned that this current list of the breakdown is inadequate? Because
No, I'm just asking, just because the question was raised that, well, Westminster's charging a fee. Well, no, we're not. But it was labeled on some receipts that were given to customers who had stuff delivered that there appeared to be municipal fees being attached to this, and we've never attached anything. So that's why I'm just trying to get a clarification on. If you feel that the breakdown that's being proposed in the emergency ordinance is sufficient to answer that question, I'm fine with it. But I don't want people thinking erroneously that Westminster is getting some kind of a fee off of this.
Correct, because we aren't, and the city of Westminster isn't levying any kind of a fee. So you're absolutely correct. And any listing of a Westminster specific fee obviously would cause concern. So let me take another look, and I'll rely on Mr. Munch, and he's listening in tonight. Matt Munch took many of the steps along the way to creating our draft and researching options. So we will look at the itemization to see how that is affected. And I'll tell you, complete transparency, we understand that our neighboring jurisdictions are seeing fees pop up with their names associated. And it's my understanding that these are fees being assessed to potentially offset the cap. So if that does happen on our receipts for our local customers, I think having some language to address that practice would be prudent.
Okay, Councilor Demott, you had another question.
more of a comment, and this is more of a long-term thing. One of the things that I talked to Representative Byrd about, and in my mind, this wouldn't mess with, any kind of free market principle, is it does seem like there is room for some better consumer protections in this realm. And so understanding that some of this may be home rule stuff, and I encouraged Representative Byrd to maybe look at this in legislation at the state. But it does seem like it would make sense to make these services disclose how these are structured so that people understand. I mean, that really even goes to the mayor's point that they're not able to put, erroneous fees and blame it on something other than what it really is for. So that's more of a long-term thing, but I would be curious for us to evaluate that a little bit closer, just in general, to make sure there are some consumer protections when it comes to these kind of services.
Mr. Frankel, any comment?
We will absolutely look at a better way to define the line item fees and ensure that those are fully disclosed if they are going to be charged.
All right, any other questions or comments before we poll the council? All right, the question before you is to authorize the city manager and the city attorney's office working together to come up with an emergency ordinance that would be pinned as early as tomorrow under the city manager's authority, and coming back to council at the first meeting in January for ratification of that ordinance. And this is to put a cap on the third-party delivery fee and to ensure that the explanations on the charges are defined as was brought forth by Ms. Grafton. If you are in support of that, it's just a simple yes. If you're not in support of that, then it'd be no. Councilor Scully?
Yes.
Councilor Volz?
Yes.
Councilor Seymour?
Yes.
Councilor Smith?
Yes.
Councilor Demott?
Begrudgingly, yes.
Okay, and the mayor. So at this point, you have a 6-0 support for moving forward with the ordinance. Mr. Frankel, if you can work with the city manager's office and see how soon you guys can get that out.
I will.
And then
Thank
we'll
you,
put
sir.
it back on your agenda. Mr. Tripp, this needs to come back on the agenda for ratification in the first council meeting in January. Any other comments on the 5-star program, Mr. Tripp, or anything else you want to add to that at this time, either you or Mr. Frankel?
Oh, sir.
Okay.
No, sir.
All right. Thank you both. Mr. Tripp, you have anything else on COVID updates?
We do not. Thank you.
Okay. If there are no other questions from the council on the COVID stuff, we will move on to the post-meeting items. For at this point right now, it concludes all business to be conducted by the city council. We'll move into the post-meeting item. First item on the agenda for tonight is the consultant services for the 2021 contract employee performance review. And who do we have bringing this forward?
This is Dee Martin, Human Resources Director. I will go on ahead and start.
Thank you.
Well, first of all, happy holidays, Mayor and City Council. Thank you so much for your time tonight. I promise that we will make this brief, but we want it to be thorough and address any questions, concerns, and receive your feedback tonight. We have 2 items to discuss with you this evening and want to receive your feedback on your council-led initiatives. One being selecting a consultant to facilitate the appraisal process for our 3 contract employees that report directly to you. And the second would be to receive feedback from council on the selection process for our new presiding municipal court judge. In this virtual meeting tonight, I want to introduce 3 key HR staff who will be helping me and you with these processes. HR Manager Lisa Chrisman, HR Administrator 2 Donna Diaz, and Senior HR Analyst Karen Layfield. they're all listening and taking notes as we go through this evening. Between the four of us, we have well over 80 years of experience with human resources in at the City of Westminster. So that certainly dates us. But I do want you to know that we are absolutely here to receive your feedback and receive your direction, as this is your process and we want to be sure that we're meeting your expectations. We have a handful of questions that we want to receive feedback on for each of these two items. We want to provide you with information, and we are hoping to address any questions that you have. So moving forward into item number 1 is the consultant services to facilitate the 21 contract employee performance review. You do have the staff report agenda memo in front of you. We're seeking direction number 1 from council on the level of involvement of City Council in reviewing the submittals. You will receive a copy of all of the RFP submittals. We will be providing a summary Excel spreadsheet to you. And we're seeking advice or perspective from you if all of council would like to be involved every step of the way through the selection process of these submittals. If you choose to have a subcommittee work with human resources, and part of that will be, we'll be providing a rating form of the submittals as part of the evaluation process. And so would seek for council to, for those that are reviewing our submittals, that they provide the ratings for our submittals. So that's question number 1. At what level does council want to be involved from the very beginning of the RFP review? 2, we're seeking direction from City Council on the level of involvement in interviewing the consultants. Whether or not you want all of council to be involved, again, a subcommittee of council to interview sort of the top list and provide direction to council on the finalists. And we would anticipate that we'll have 2 or so consultants that ultimately would be interviewed, certainly by all of council before a selection is made. And then the last formal question that we would have for you is how to best communicate with City Council on this process. Again, we will be doing some spreadsheets. We'll be providing copies of the submittal. So how is it best to communicate with council in the status of the process, in scheduling interviews, etc. So 3 primary questions on this first item.
All right, let me see if I can help you a little bit. As far as myself, looking at whether or not it should be the full council on the committee for the review or a portion of, I'm happy with either one. But I do recommend that somebody has been on council for a period of time that has been through the selection process that we've used for hiring our director reports be involved. I don't care who it is. If the council as a large, and we only have 6 here tonight, if the entire council wants to be involved in every step through the process, I'm certainly have no problem with that, as long as they understand that this is going to be a time commitment and it may not be something that can always be done after hours, depending upon the process and the application. But if we have sufficient notice, I think everybody can try to plan time to do this. It really will depend upon how many people we get that respond to the RFP and how detailed they get in their presentations as to what services might have to be performed by them or how soon they could do it. So I think some of those things still need to be done as a group. But whether it's a smaller group that does the initial evaluation, I think it's most important that all 7 members of council be involved in the final interviews of those being selected so that everyone's comfortable with the company and the process.
Absolutely.
Other comments, Mr. Councilor Seymour, I think you're up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to go along with what the mayor says. I would feel comfortable with fellow councilors if they wish to, be part of the initial stages of this. I don't particularly have a need, want, or desire to be involved in the initial parts of that. It would be more than happy just to receive executive summaries of those and then would trust my fellow counselors that would be involved in that to bring us down to the finalist, which I too agree with the mayor. I would like to be part of that as a whole on that process.
Any other council comments? Councilor Smith?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. What type of time commitment in those initial stages are we looking at? So I'm able to make a more educated decision.
Absolutely. Very good question. Thank you, Councilor Smith. I will talk briefly about the timeline that we have projected for you. So it is a pretty fast turnaround. I have a few slight amendments to what was submitted. In order to expedite the process, we hope to release the RFP January 4th, close it by January 19th, and then it'll be a city review again by HR and all of council or part of council January 20th through February 1st. Consultant interviews most likely the week of February 16th, again with all city council or part of city council. And then final interviews with all of city council, most likely the week of March 8th, with the contract being awarded March 22nd. It is a pretty fast timeline. In some parts, it depends on how many exactly, as was stated, it depends on how many RFPs we receive. I will tell you right now where we're posting, maybe that will help. We already know that we are soliciting our RFP submittals by CPSHR. That's a national firm that does this type of work. Employers Council, Employment Matters, Management Partners, the Elam Group, various OD professionals who are independent consultants, ICMA we're posting, as well as on Demand Star. So we are doing our very best to get the word out about this process. We do not know how many submittals we will receive. So I hate to be vague, Councilor Smith, but it just really sort of depends.
Okay, that makes sense. What has been the norm for council in this type of situation? Has it been all of council in the past? Has it been a subcommittee? Is it just dependent on the council that's appointing?
Yes, I believe it does depend upon the council. I would say historically, when you look back at this type of process, a subcommittee often does a lot of the legwork, definitely of city council, definitely reporting back to city council every step along the way. All of city council will receive all submittals as well as the spreadsheet. And certainly any councilor could say, you know, if when the committee, if you go to a committee, if they say this is who we're recommending, certainly there could be a change in direction at any point.
Okay, and my final question would be, I would presume that this would be a Monday through Thursday, 7 to 6 timeframe?
Not necessarily, to be completely honest. Quite often in dealing with consultants, we're also working on Fridays. And so this staff is absolutely prepared to do that. Definitely in terms of evenings, there could be some evening interviews, but probably the consultants, you know, they will obviously do what we ask them to do, I'm guessing, in terms of interviews. But, you know, obviously the work days would be preferred probably by the consultants. But I am sure that any of these consultants would be happy to interview in the evenings if council needed.
Okay, I just have to be mindful of my profession, and if I were to be on that subcommittee and it does take daytime hours, then it's something that I got to be mindful of, and I don't want to commit to it if I can't make those meetings. So I wouldn't be opposed for council having a subcommittee and then being updated as far as what the information that comes of that subcommittee. But I most definitely would be very interested in the finality of finalizing interviews and who we would ultimately appoint.
Absolutely.
And that's all my questions. Thank you.
Councilor Demott?
Thank you, Mayor. I would like to participate if the group's okay with it. I'm okay with doing a subcommittee or the whole group. I mean, obviously, if parts of the council, would prefer it that way. I see benefit in all of us having as much say as possible because we all have very different lenses that we look at things, and ultimately that, to me, lends to the best decisions. So I would like to participate. Also, understanding, like Councilor Smith, I do have a day job, so my job's mostly flexible where I need it to be, but there is always conflicts in that. So just depending on that, I should be able to participate and would like to whatever level I can.
Thank you.
Councilor Scully.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I agree with what the Mayor said. I'm indifferent to whether or not we're actually a part of the the participation, as long as something comes to us in the end and we get to see it. I am open to sitting on a committee. I could make that work. So it would be easier if it were at night, but daytime is not usually a problem either. I usually can make it work with work. So I'd be open to that as well.
Any other comments from council? I think pretty well everybody except you, Mr. Voles. Do you have any feedback one way or the other? Okay. Ms. Martin, let me propose that we, at this point, I think there's support for a subcommittee. We don't know who's going to be on that yet, so I don't know that you need a decision tonight on that. But I think we would be open to having a subcommittee do the initial reviews as long as council receives all the data and information that everybody does, but that the final interviews and the selection must involve the entire council.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mayor and City Council. This is fabulous feedback. Really appreciate it. And we'll ensure that we get you all of the information. And of course, adjustments can be made as we go through this process as well. So thank you so much.
Is that all you need on that one?
Yes, sir.
All right, let's go talk about the judge.
Yes, sir. So again, we are here to serve you, and it would be similar questions, a handful of questions that we're seeking direction from City Council on. One would be to the degree of involvement City Council would desire reviewing initial applications. All of council will receive a spreadsheet with the applications. I will tell you that unless directed otherwise by council, a best practice is to do an anonymous screen. So the initial spreadsheet would not include names. It would be candidate 1, candidate 2. This simply allows for sort of a bias-free screening. Not that any of you would be biased, but that is just an HR practice. And so you would all receive that. The question would be at what level all of council would like in the initial reviewing of applications, if that's all of council or a subcommittee. We traditionally, in a recruitment process such as this, have several steps along the way. I've provided a sample timeline. Certainly this can change, but we have the larger pool, and then you screen based on information that they've submitted and qualifications. Then you screen again after perhaps an initial interview, virtual. And then we can certainly, our ultimate desire would be to get to some sort of an assessment process where all of council will then absolutely would be involved with final interviews. In the last process that we did, council had a subcommittee. Again, it's totally your decision on how involved you all want to be. We certainly just want to respect your time. We had a subcommittee last time interviewing the sort of more qualified candidates after an initial screen of the pool. And then all of council interviewed the last 2 finalists. But council can certainly be involved in any step of the way, and we did provide a sample timeline.
Ms. Martin, from my perspective, This one's a little bit different than the other one. The other one is just documenting process. This is an actual hire. A number of our council members have not been through this process before from beginning to end. And if nothing else, it could be a learning experience.
Absolutely.
Myself, my preference is that the entire council participate so that everybody understands how to go through the process and do the evaluations, if nothing else for a learning curve for themselves, but to ensure continuity if this happens again in the future, that they've all had some experience in dealing with it. But I'll leave it to the majority of council. Councilor Seymour, I think you're up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You took the words right out of my mouth. This is a different process than the consultant one. I, for one, very interested in that process, and the hiring level is a little bit different. So would like to be more involved and to a greater extent.
Okay. Councilor Scully?
I agree with you, Mr. Mayor. This person will be directly reporting to us, so I think we need to have a more direct involvement and be involved in each step as well. So I agree with you.
Councilor Demott?
Ditto.
Any other comments from the other council members? Ditto has already been used, by the way.
Second.
Sounds good. Councilor Vols?
I'm going to say ditto as well. I think it sounds good to me. I agree with everything said. I can't think of anything else to replace ditto, so I'm going to say ditto.
Okay. The one thing I would ask all of council to keep in mind, we have both of these running concurrent. So as you think about your time commitment on the subcommittee, keep in mind you're going to be doing this pretty well as an overlap. So there could be some serious time commitments in both of these. However, I think the priority for us should be the judge. That's, to me, that's going to be taking preference. And if anything had to be delayed for the inability of the council to participate, it would be the selection of the consultant. I don't think we can delay the judge piece. We need to get that one filled. Ms. Martin, when do you think you would potentially be posting this one for the judgeship?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, we're thrilled to work with all of you. It will truly be a fun and extraordinary experience. You will be amazed at the qualifications of many candidates. I hope you'll enjoy the process. A couple of items that we need to discuss. But first of all, Mayor and City Council, we hope to open this job January 4th. We do need to pin down a few items so that we can get that posting set and ready. Per council's feedback to our emails, it does look like the job description will say 1 to 2 years preferred municipal judge experience versus required. It will also say they must have their Colorado bar and a knowledge of Colorado law. So that will be in the job description unless we hear otherwise from you. We do need to set a recommended salary range in doing our survey work. We believe a range could be $160,000 to $175,000. This is the mean of our sister cities with the average of pay of $170,000. So that would be a question as well. And then finally, just information, we plan on posting this on our NeoGov system, which then reaches out to a lot of various sites, including governmentjobs.com and Monster, a variety of others pick those up. We plan on advertising, releasing this to the Colorado Bar Association, the Colorado Municipal Judge Association, the Colorado Hispanic Association, the Women's Bar Association, Careers in Government, LinkedIn, Monster, plus various listservs. So we do plan on releasing this if we have all of this information tied up by January 4th.
Okay. Council, I know that she's asked a couple of questions. I know several of you commented in regards to the preferred versus required. And I had made an earlier comment to Ms. Martin that I was concerned about making it required because it would have knocked out the judge that we just approved appointing because he has less than a year. And by leaving it as the preferred, we could open that up and still have him apply and compete for the job. Any other comments from council? Councilor Vols, I think you're up.
Yeah, thank you. Just a quick question. Ms. Martin, do we reach out to people who had applied before? I wasn't involved in that process, but I've heard from others that there were excellent candidates in that last mix. Do we reach out or we just assume they see through the normal channels that it's open?
Thank you, Councilor Volz. I did fail to mention that. We will absolutely be reaching out to them as well.
All right, very good. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Other comments or questions from Councilor Seymour?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Since Ms. Martin asked this, it sounds as that's a reasonable salary range. It seems in line too. We want to make sure we can attract those that would be willing to serve, but also, you know, to pay them appropriately for the market.
Okay, other comments, council? All right, you've heard the recommendation of staff and the request they have. You've had opportunity to comment and review it. I'll ask, poll the council this time if it's appropriate for those staff to go ahead and move forward with the advertisement, and then we'll start the whole process. When was that closed, Ms. Martin? I know you said January 4th start.
Yes, so we would plan to close the position February 1st. So that, you know, coming with the holidays, January tends to be a time where people are just sort of catching their breath. This will take a little bit longer, this recruitment, but it's just so important. So I do believe that we can most likely make an offer by April or May, and certainly with Judge Lontine, I believe we're in good hands for the interim.
All right. And I agree with you wholeheartedly. This is a very important decision and we don't want to feel rushed. We want to make sure we've got another potential long-term hire when we make this decision. At this point, just again, a yes or no from the council to see if they want to approve moving forward based on the discussion we had tonight. Councilor Demott.
Yes.
Councilor Smith.
Yes.
Councilor Seymour.
Yes.
Councilor Vols.
Yes.
Councilor Scully.
Yes.
And the mayor. Ms. Martin, what else can we do for you tonight?
That is absolutely all we need. I just hope you have a wonderful evening. Have some terrific time with your families. Thank you so much for this feedback. Very, very helpful.
All right. Before we close, council, are there any closing comments from anybody on the council? If not, ladies and gentlemen, we will not meet again this year. 2020 is coming. We don't want anything bad to happen. We don't even think anything to happen. Hope all of you enjoy your holidays as best as you can. Hope your families are safe and enjoy those holidays, and we will see everyone next year. Council and staff, we are adjourned. It is now 9:43.
Happy New Year.
You too.